I want to make a claim in this video that's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of the people most likely to be watching it. If you're someone who's built a career on output, who shows up, who hits your numbers, who has been a dependable one for 10, 15, or 20 years, you are almost certainly not performing as well as you think you are. The output is real, the numbers are real, the career is real. I'm not arguing with any of that. What I'm arguing with is the assumption underneath it. The assumption that because the output is sustained, the system producing it is fine. It's not. In a lot of cases, what looks like from the outside as sustained high performance is actually something different. It's compensated decline. The system underneath it has been quietly losing capacity for years. The output has held steady because you've been burning through reserves to keep it there. And the bill on that is coming due. For people in their 40s, for most people in their 50s, for almost everyone by 60. I'm Zach Scanapico. I coach high performers, and this is the conversation I have over and over. Someone with a great resume, strong career, stable life, telling me they don't understand why everything feels harder than it used to, even though by external measures, they're doing fine. In the next 12 minutes, I want to give you the actual mechanics of what's happening underneath sustained high performance. Why the people who are the best at performing are the ones who notice this last. And the question you have to be willing to ask if you want to keep performing for the next 20 years instead of just the next 2. If you're new here, this channel is for people who perform at a high level and don't want just generic wellness tips. You want a system that works. This video is for the version of you that's hardest to talk to. The version that's still hitting numbers, still getting promoted, still respected at work. The version that has a real defensible argument for why the framework I'm about to walk you through doesn't apply to you. I want you to stay anyway, because if any of this lands, it's going to land for the version of you that already knows. The version of you you've been overriding for a while now. What sustained high performance actually is. Most people think of performance as a steady state thing. You're either performing well or you're not. You're either at your peak or you've fallen off. There's a binary somewhere, and as long as you're on the right side of it, the system is working. That model is wrong, and it's the reason this all sneaks up on people. Real performance, the kind that happens inside an actual human body, is not a steady state output. It's the result of the relationship between two things, your output and your capacity to produce that output. Output is what the world sees. Numbers hit, projects shipped, decisions made, promotions earned. Capacity is what helps produce the output. It's everything underneath. Your nervous system, your cardiovascular system, your hormone system, your sleep architecture, the depth of your recovery between hard things, the resilience of your tissue, the bandwidth of your attention, the steadiness of your mood. In a healthy system, those two things, they move together. Capacity stays high, output stays high, and the output is cheap, meaning the system isn't paying a heavy price to produce it. You can do hard things and recover from them inside a normal night's sleep. You can handle a stressful week and not feel it the following Monday. The performance is sustainable because the underlying system is intact. In an unhealthy system, and this is the one we're talking about, those two things diverge. The output stays the same. From the outside, nothing has changed. You're still hitting the same numbers, still leading the same teams, still showing up, but the capacity underneath is dropping slowly, year by year. And the only reason your output hasn't dropped with it is because you're paying more and more to maintain it. The system is borrowing. It's burning through reserves. It's pulling capital from places that aren't supposed to be drawn from. Sleep quality, recovery depth, hormonal balance, nervous system regulation. All of these are being quietly cashed out to keep the visible output where it's always been. The output is real, but it's no longer cheap. It's expensive, and it's getting more expensive every year. That's compensated decline. The reason this matters is that compensated decline is invisible from the outside and almost invisible from the inside. The numbers look the same, the promotions keep coming, people keep telling you you're doing great. You feel slightly off, but you can't point to anything specific. So the system is allowed to keep degrading because nothing on the surface is signaling that anything is wrong until it crosses a threshold that the borrowing can no longer cover. and then everything visible changes at once. Why the best performers notice this last, I want to say something here that might be the most important point in this whole video. The very same traits that make you a high performer are the traits that hide compensated decline from you the longest. Not from other people, from yourself. Think about what high performance actually requires. It requires the ability to override discomfort, to push through fatigue, to work when you don't feel like working, to deliver when the system inside you is signaling it would rather not. That ability, the override, is the core skill of high performance. It's what separates the people who hit their numbers from the people who don't. It's almost certainly part of why you've succeeded at what you do. But here's what that override is actually doing under the hood. It's interrupting the signal between your body and your awareness. Your body is constantly producing data. I'm tired. I'm depleted. I haven't recovered. Something is off. This is harder than it should be. The data is supposed to inform your behavior. Slow down, rest, recover, restore. In a high performer, that signal is overridden as a matter of a professional habit. 20 years of doing it, 30 years of doing it. The override becomes so automatic, you stop hearing the signal at all. And here's the trap. Compensated decline shows up as exactly that kind of subtle, low-grade signal that override is built to suppress. You're a little more tired than you used to be. Recovery is taking longer than it. You're slightly less sharp at 3 p.m. than you were when you were 35. A normal person, a person without your override capacity, would notice these signals at year 2 and adjust. Slow down, get more sleep, stop pushing. A high performer doesn't notice them at year 2. The override is too well trained, so the signal just keeps getting louder and the override keeps suppressing them year after year until eventually the underlying system has degraded enough that no amount of override can paper over it anymore. That's when high performers crash. And when they do, they almost always say the same thing. I had no idea this was building. They had been getting that signal for 10 years. They had spent 10 years suppressing them with the same skill that built their career. This is the trap that almost no high performer sees coming. The skill that got you here is the skill that prevents you from seeing what's happening underneath your feet. You are uniquely bad at noticing this because you're uniquely good at overriding the exact information you need in order to notice. That's not a character flaw. It's a structural feature of how high performance works. But it means you cannot trust your own felt sense of how you're doing. By the time you think something is wrong, the system has been signaling it to you for years. A short personal note. I'm going to tell you something briefly from my own life because I want you to know I'm not describing this from the outside. In my consulting years, running my own business in my mid-20s, I was a high performer by every external measure, working 10, 12-hour days, hitting my targets, building a client base. Looked great on paper. What I didn't see at the time is that I was running on borrowed capacity for years. Caffeine and nicotine were doing the work that recovery was supposed to do. Exercise had stopped being recovery and had become another stress on a system that already had too much. The yoga classes I was going to weren't moving the needle the way they should have because the system underneath it was running too hot to actually receive the benefit. But the output was fine. That was the trap. The output was telling me everything was working. The output was lying to me. I kept overriding the signal because the signals were subtle and because I had built an identity around someone who could push through things. The override was an old habit and a strong one until the override stopped working. When it stopped working, it stopped fast. The system finally protested loud enough and I couldn't override it anymore. And at that point, the borrowing had been going on for so long that there was no way to keep performing while also rebuilding what I had run down. I had to stop. The whole thing had to come apart so I could put it back together differently. The reason I tell you this is because I see the same pattern happen in almost every executive I work with. They're 5 or 7 or 10 years into the same arc I was on. The override is still working. The output is there. The signals are getting louder, but they're still being suppressed. And they think they have time. The math is the math. They don't have as much time as they think. So here's the part of the video where I would normally tell you what to do. I'm not going to do that, not in this one, because the issue isn't a tactic. The issue is whether you can be honest with yourself about what's actually happening before the override fails. So instead, I want to leave you with this one question. If your output stayed exactly the same as it is right now, same numbers, same career trajectory, same external validation, but you knew for certain that the cost of producing that output had been climbing every year for the last decade, would you keep paying it? Or would you start asking what the system underneath actually needs before the bill comes due in a way you can't negotiate with? That's the question the people I work with eventually get to. Not always at the right time. Sometimes they get it after the system has already crashed and they don't have a choice anymore. Sometimes they get to it earlier, while there's still room to rebuild without losing everything they've built on top of it. The earlier you get to that question, the easier the rebuild is. The longer you wait, the more aggressive the intervention has to be. But the question is the entry point. So let me bring this together. What you call high performance is not a steady state. It's the relationship between your output and the capacity that produces it. In a healthy system, those move together. In an unhealthy system, the one most high performers are in by their 40s or 50s, the output stays steady while the capacity underneath it quietly drops. You don't see it because the same trait that makes you a high performer, the override, is what suppresses the signal that would tell you something is wrong. The skill that built your career is the skill that hides what's happening underneath your feet. By the time you can feel it, the system has been signaling to you for years. And the question that actually matters is not whether you can keep producing the same output. You probably can for a while. The question is what it's costing you and whether you can be honest about that before the bill comes due. In the next video on this channel, I'm going to walk you through what this actually looks like as a real arc, what happens when a high performer hits the wall, what the rebuild actually requires, and what changes on the other side. I'll use my own story for it because I lived this exact pattern and came out the other side. And what I learned is the foundation of the work I do now. I'll see you there.